I've interviewed a lot of, let's call them billionaires, on my podcast. Everybody from Mark Cuban, Richard Branson, Sarah Blakely. But I wanted to see from all of these other people, again, ranging from Ray Dalio, who's the biggest hedge fund manager in the world, to Mark Cuban and others. I wanted to see what did they do to kind of grow their money and keep it and then continue to grow it. And it's a special kind of personality. Like I could never make $1 billion because I would just sell before then. If I was building a company and someone offered me 1/100th of that, I would sell no matter what. So I was interviewing Peter Thiel, and he was the founder of PayPal. He was the first investor in Facebook. He made billions on Facebook. He made billions on another company called Palantir, and he was telling me how when Mark Zuckerberg in the early days of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg was offered by Microsoft $1 billion for Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg would have made $250 million. He was a 24-year-old kid with no money, and he would have made $250 million. Can you imagine being 24 years old and being offered $250 million? And he said no. And the whole board, including Peter Thiel, was pushing him to say yes. And Mark Zuckerberg finally said, and this is what Peter Thiel was repeating to me, Mark Zuckerberg said, if I had $250 million, what would I do for the rest of my life? Well, I'd probably create a website where other people could communicate with each other, but I've already got that. So why would I need to sell what I already have and just do it again? And so, of course, now Zuckerberg's worth 50 or 60 billion, and Peter Thiel made many billions on Facebook, so it all worked out. But that's a different type of mentality, a different type of mindset, and that's what I was interested in discovering. Like, is there consistent differences in mindset? And what was so original about Facebook? And there was already MySpace, Friendster, GeoCities, Tribe.com. There was a million social networks before then. And he said no, it was the only social network with confirmed identity. So that's what made it unique. But if you think about it, a lot of websites confirm your identity. Amazon confirms your identity before you buy goods on Amazon. You can't just use a fake identity and a fake credit card and so on. You have to have a confirmed identity. So they took this concept of confirmed identity, which was already well known on the internet, and they took this concept of a social network, which was well known on the internet. They combined them together, and you have Facebook. So this is a very powerful idea. It puts you in the least crowded room, which is where you always want to be, whether you want to be a successful entrepreneur, a successful writer, a successful YouTuber, a successful comedian, a successful anything. You should go to the room that's least crowded. Else you have too much competition and it's too difficult. Making a Me Too business never has the right kind of value. It's almost like a commodity, is valued cheaply, and you just won't be able to grow as fast because you have too much competition. I think Matt Ridley talks about it in the book Rational Optimist. Okay. But I've certainly probably written about it more than anyone else, and I use it all the time. So I've even done workshops where I'll have people come up with a list of 10 ideas and then talk to your neighbor and combine your 10 ideas with his or her 10 ideas and see what ideas result. And it's always amazing, the results. Usually the first lists are boring, and then that combined list is amazing. And so ideas is so powerful. I mean, just think about all the, even, how do they describe movies? When you pitch a movie, like George Lucas goes in and pitches Star Wars, he says it's a Western mixed with science fiction. Boom, idea sex, Star Wars. So there's so many examples of this sort of thing that it's a real powerful technique for creativity. Richard Branson. So he was already a successful magazine publisher. He was 27 years old. He was a music magazine publisher. And just like that, he decides, I want to start an airline. And everyone was like, and this is also a very common thing. Everyone basically said to him, Richard, you are crazy. You can't do that. You're a 27-year-old kid. You just know the music magazine business. And by the way, British Airways is a practically a government-run monopoly. There were no other airlines in England. How are you going to compete against a monopoly? And you need $100 million to buy an airplane. Where are you going to find $100 million? So Richard Branson, in very ready, fire, aim fashion, was like, no problem. And he calls up Boeing, and somehow he convinces Boeing to lend him a plane. He's 27 years old. He convinced them, he persuaded them to lend him a plane. So a lot of these billionaires have very strong persuasion abilities, and persuasion is a skill that can be learned and studied and mastered. You can start off as a very bad persuader, and you can end up being a very strong persuader. But Richard Branson had it. I think he had it from the beginning, and then he convinced Heathrow, give me a landing strip for a year. So he borrowed a plane, and he was going to return it in a year. He essentially borrowed from Heathrow a landing strip. JFK gave him another landing strip, and now he was an international airline all of a sudden. Boom. He didn't need any money up front. I mean, he did eventually, but that's like an amazing case of not taking any risks for himself, but starting an airline, which he then sold for billions, many years later, and now he's got a rocket ship company, Virgin Galactic. Yeah, like if he wrote a check for $100 million out of his pocket, that would have been high risk. Instead, he risked pretty much almost nothing, and it cost him nothing to call Boeing and try to. If Boeing had said no, maybe he never would have started the airline, and we never would have known anything. He would have started some other business and been successful at that. I mean, he started over 300 businesses, but again, it's trying to do things as low risk as possible. Here was a common thing with many of these people. It's what I call the ready, fire, aim strategy that they all seem to use. Like a great example would be Damon John. This was a guy who was a waiter at Red Lobster, the casual dining chain, and on the weekends he would sew these hats and put a hip hop logo on it and just sell to friends or people passing by or whatever. And then he went to a clothing conference. He got a $300,000 order, I think, from Macy's, and he said, yes, I'll do it. And this is what I call ready, fire, aim. He couldn't fulfill a $300,000 order. He was just by himself sewing hats and logos onto hats. But he didn't say what I might have said or what many people would have said, which is, oh, darn, how about I just do a $5,000 order for you and then I'll build up. I don't even have the money to do this. I don't have the employees. He just said yes, and I'm sure in his head he was thinking, I'll figure this out. It's a $300,000 order. I will figure this out. And he then went and mortgaged his mom's house. And that weekend, he hired a bunch of seamstresses. He filled up the house with all these people sewing. He finished sewing enough hats to fulfill the $300,000 order, delivered the hats to Macy's, got the money, paid down the mortgage, and boom, he had some money. And by the way, he didn't full force start FUBU, his clothing empire, even then. He still stayed as a waiter at Red Lobster until he really had enough orders consistently that he quit full time. And I find a lot of these billionaires actually to be extremely risk averse. You would think these entrepreneurs, these billionaires took a lot of risk to get there. No, they're very, very risk averse. They do things, even though he said yes without knowing what he was doing, and he took the risk of mortgaging his mom's house, he knew he had a contractual order from Macy's. It was not like he was going to deliver and they wouldn't pay, and he knew how to make the hats. He priced it out. He knew he could hire these people. He could finish it in a weekend, and he did it. And, Sarah Blakely with Spanx is a very similar story. She got a huge order from Neiman Marcus. She had not even made 2 versions of her product yet. And what did she do? She said yes. She had no factory, no manufacturer. She needed a manufacturer to fulfill this order. And at the time, she was selling fax machines door to door. What manufacturer is going to return her phone calls? And yet she was able to persuade one to return her phone calls. She fulfilled the order and she made the money. I think this concept of going to the room that is least crowded, you want to find your own unique voice. When you try to do something unique, everyone is going to tell you, almost by definition, you can't do that, because they're going to say this for 2 reasons. One is because no one else has ever done it before. But almost by definition, you're the only person in the room, so no one's ever done it. So they're going to start off saying, based on their own knowledge, they're going to say, you can't do this. And the other thing is, another group of people are going to say can't, which are people who are already successful. They're going to say, you can't do that. You can't skip the line. You have to wait your turn. I did this for 20 years, and now I'm doing it. Let me do it first. You have to go to the other side of can't, and you have to have enough confidence in yourself and enough obsession and passion for what you're doing to be able to figure out, because the people who are telling you can't do it, they're not as passionate as you are. They're not as obsessed as you are. They don't know the real details of your idea. They don't have your skill sets. So they're just saying it for their own agenda and their own reasons. They're really saying that they can't do it, so they don't want you to do it. And going on the other side of can't is where all of these billionaires and where every other successful achiever ends up going. They go on the other side of the word can't.